I'm still in Iceland playing a strong chess tournament, and today I got paired as the black pieces against a FIDE master. He spent so long in the opening that he was under 30 minutes by move 10, which is huge time pressure at this level. Let's see how the game went. My opponent started with d4, and here I decided to stop playing the King's Indian, and I somehow found an even worse defense, the Benoni. I guess I'm a masochist. I don't know what to say. I'm still figuring it out. He pushed d5, I played g6, pawn to e4, d6, he took out his knight, I took out my bishop, he took out his other knight, and here I remembered the last Benoni game I played in the same tournament, and I remember Hammer telling me that I was supposed to push e6 earlier.
One thing I wanted to mention is that I feel like I also said this to you on stream like a week ago, when you have to go like e6, e takes d5, it's generally nice to do that as early as possible.
Oh, I thought so before castling?
Maybe even before knight f6.
I'm still learning this opening, and there's so much nuance in move order and when you're supposed to do things that I played e6 and it was a big opening mistake. What I didn't realize is that he can just take, which is what he did in the game. Here, if I would have taken with my bishop, I would have really weak light squares, so it actually wasn't a great option, and my best move here was to take the knight, which I did, pawn takes, and then recapture with the bishop. Even though I traded off my fianchetto bishop, at least he wouldn't have a knight to bully my light squares. I knew that this position was worse, but I also realized that, hey, at least I weakened his pawn structure, let's try to make the best out of a bad opening. He played bishop check, I took out my knight, he castled, and here I realized that my pawn on d6 was an issue and I needed to figure out a way to defend it. So I moved up my queen, attacking his bishop with tempo, so here he can't take because he lose a bishop. I didn't like the move c4 because I thought that he wouldn't want to block his light squared bishop. I figured that if I can somehow trade off the bishop pair, that would be probably good for me. The computer didn't agree, but the computer is a psycho, so we're just gonna explain it from a human point of view for all of the engine Andes who comment on my videos with long variations. And hey, my human opponent agreed and he didn't like that move and he played queen to e2. Here I castled and now he moved his knight up to attack my bishop. The good thing for me here is that we were just on move 10 and he was already under 30 minutes on the clock. He had about 24 moves, which is considered pretty serious time pressure in a classical game. So my position was worse, but again, the lower you get on the clock, the higher likelihood you are to blunder and make inaccurate moves. So here, since he was attacking my bishop, I wouldn't be able to move back because he would be able to take my pawn and fork my rooks. So instead, I just continued with my development with moving my knight to e7. He took my bishop, I recaptured. Here he played bishop to g5. He was pinning yet another knight, and I don't like being pinned, so I kicked his bishop back. He moved over to e3, and here I played g5. My idea behind g5 was the only thing I have going for me in this position is the fact that he has some weak pawns. I didn't want to allow him to play a move like f4, and I thought that with my pawn on g5, it would intimidate him from playing this because after taking, bishop takes, and then a move like e5, now he has another isolated pawn. And if I'm somehow able to trade off pieces, maybe I'll have some chances in the endgame. Here, he moved his rook to b1. And I was considering a lot of options here. I knew that this pawn was my weakness, so I considered moving my queen out of the pin. So many pins in this game, I was really fighting hard. Because then, if he would attack my pawn, I would be able to defend it with the queen. Here, I decided to try for something tricky. I moved my queen to a5, putting pressure on these two pawns. The dream, of course, would have been if he decided that he needed to defend these pawns. If he made a move like c4, this would be good for me because then maybe I would even put my knight in the center of the board and his bishop wouldn't have a lot of space. Again, my plan here was to try and close off the position because knights are better in close positions. If I was able to get anything like that, I thought that I would be able to recuperate from my bad opening. But instead, my FM opponent found the best move. Shocker. He played queen to b4, putting pressure on my pawn. And here I had a few options. I could play something crazy, like king to d7 to protect my pawn, but this would probably lose instantly. After a move like e5 where he's targeting the base pawn here, I would maybe lose my c5 pawn, and I don't want to put my king in the middle of the board. And then I had two options, taking the pawn on c3 or the pawn on a2. You know when you sit in a position for a while saying, hey, this is a critical moment, you calculate, you're doing everything you should do, you think you play the best move, and then you check the computer after and you're like, wow, I'm dumb. Well, that's what happened to me here. My initial instinct told me to take on c3, which would have been the better line because I don't want to open up his rooks towards my king. But I thought that this move was trickier and I ended up taking. What I missed here is that after rook here, my plan was to play my knight to e5, threatening his queen. I didn't think he'd want to take because if we trade off, I'm not worried about an attack anymore, and that gives me good chances. So even if he had moved his queen back, I could have pushed my pawn forward, and this would have been pretty good for me. The move I missed though was queen to e2, and now I would have had only one square to retreat my queen, and yes, I would have Botez gambited IRL. He was probably intimidated about that, I understand, that's probably why he also missed it. And keep in mind, again, I was playing these trickier moves because my opponent was in very extreme time pressure here. He was under 2 minutes on the clock at this point, and he would only get extra time after move 40. So he played his rook to b3, blocking off the pawn. And here, once again, I thought, hey, there's a big difference between these two king moves and this queen move. Let me sit and find the best plan. And what did I do? I found the wrong move. Again. Here, I should have moved my king over. I was really nervous about what would happen on this semi-open file and going towards where the rook is, and I thought that moving my king over to f7 was a better move. But I missed what happened in the game. He played queen takes, and here, if it's his turn to move, he's actually threatening something very scary, and that's bishop takes knight, knight takes bishop, queen check, and of course I can't go back because I get mated. If I block with my rook, he takes this pawn, I take with my king, he takes back the rook, and I'm just getting crushed here. So to avoid that, I played b6. And here he once again found the best move, which was pretty crazy because again, he only had 2 minutes on the clock. He played bishop to c4, and what he's trying to do here is create a discovery attack on my queen. Once again, I continued going for the trickiest lines I could find. If I could somehow get him to run too low on the clock, this was where he had the highest likelihood of making a blunder. I moved over my rook with the idea of if he made a move like doubling up, then I could move my rook back, attack the queen. If the queen checked me, I could block. If the queen went back, then I'd actually have moves like knight to a5, forking the bishop and the rook. So at least this gave me chances. But again, found the best move. He played rook takes b6, capturing a free pawn and putting pressure on my queen. I took the pawn back on c2, trying to get whatever compensation I could. So here, because my queen wasn't under attack anymore, he had to move his rook. He moved it over, which is a good move. He's continuing to put pressure on my knight and my pawn. I did an extra defensive move with my knight, also attacking his queen. He captured. I took a pawn here as well. Here, he pinned my knight to my rook. So I thought that the best move was to go knight back to defend it. Here he took my pawn, and he was still under 2 minutes, and so I was trying to make the moves with the most pressure. Here I moved rook b8. I thought it was the trickiest line because I would at least have some kind of checkmate threats on b2. He took my rook with check. I didn't want to take the bishop because I wanted to win the rook back, so I moved my king over, attacking his rook and checkmate at the same time. So here he pushed f3 to defend against the checkmate. I moved my queen over to attack it once more. Also, he couldn't check and win my rook here because the queen was always defending this square. Here, since he was so low on time, he decided to repeat the position once so that he could gain those extra 30-second increments and also get closer to move 40. But here is where he deviated. He took my pawn with check, I recapture, and now he brought his bishop back to defend against this checkmate. I brought out my knight to put pressure on his pawn. I thought, hey, I can at least win a pawn back, so that it'll be 2 versus 3, and in the miracle where we trade off queens, I'd actually have some kind of drawing chances. Of course, the biggest problem in my position here was the fact that my king was extremely vulnerable and in the open. For now, I had some counterplay on his king, but if he would be able to defend it, then he would be the one who would switch over and get the attack on me. He pushed his pawn up to defend his bishop and free up his queen. I captured a pawn back, and here he moved his queen over to attack my rook and also bring it closer to getting some kind of attack on my king. I gave him a check first, he moved his king over, and what I was trying to do with this is just create some kind of perpetual chances. Maybe I would be able to sack the rook and in some miracle get a perpetual. It didn't work right in this position, but I felt I should always increase my chances. Now I moved my rook up. I wasn't afraid of him forking my rook and my queen because I could just move up and attack his rook. Instead, he moved his queen over, attacking my knight and inching his queen even closer to my king. I moved my knight up, and the problem with this move is that when my knight was on this square, I was defending the A1 square, but by moving it, he could now bring his rook into the action and now start preparing some very scary checks against my king. At this point in the game, I had used so much time that I was also under 2 minutes. I was trying to figure out the best move here, but I realized I was probably lost, so again, just try to go for whatever gives me the best chances. I moved my queen here. Obviously, he wouldn't trade, but if he did, I'd have some drawing chances. He gave me check, and this is when my king started running. I moved up, check again, moved up, yet another check. The king moved up, and here he brought his bishop into play. I made my only legal move, and he gave me a check here. I couldn't move my king back because he'd take the queen and fork my king and my queen. I was already lost at this point, so I moved my king over. He took with the rook. I ran away. He gave me a check, and I basically resigned here. This is where the checkmate was. Sadly, my king wasn't able to run very far. Thanks for watching. Even though I lost my game today, I'm trying to learn from every single game, and hopefully you guys are able to as well. Bye!